Deemed rehabilitated and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast as I slurp a bunch of water right before I come on. And this is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, you are going to, I don't know if enjoy is the right word today, but today's show is going to be very, very informative. We do have R.C. Williams back with us of Sherlock Exposes when it comes to banking, financing, cryptocurrency, you name it. R.C. Williams is the go-to person for the Carl Jackson Show podcast. We're going to have him on to talk about the SVB collapse, the bailout, and what it may mean for you and I in the future, digital currency, the threat of the digital currency. So we've got a lot to talk about. But before we get started, I want you to just stay tuned quickly for some quick program messaging, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. So just quickly, let me just remind you, this show is not possible without our sponsors. So guys, listen, it almost feels like the crap is going to hit the fan. So just in case it does, I want you to be prepared. I say that in all sincerity. I think I have to laugh so that I don't cry. But I say that in all sincerity. 4patriots.com, the number 4patriots.com. Guys, I want you to go to 4patriots.com. I want you to stock up on some survival food. They have food kits that are water resistant. They stack easily. They last for 25 years. And I always recommend that you keep normal food as well in an emergency kit just in case. But you can go to 4patriots.com and just make sure you're prepared, okay? Because times are getting kind of crazy. They're getting kind of scary. And I just want you to be safe. I want you to be prepared. I want you to be aware of the things that are going on a macro level with our federal government, what's going on with foreign policy. And I just want you to be safe. And I want you to be prepared. I want your family to be prepared. So 4patriots.com. If you use my name, Carl, or use my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, as far as the promo code is concerned, you will get, and you purchase up to $97. You'll get a year-long guarantee. You'll get free shipping with that order. Again, this food is good for 25 years. And you'll know this, that a portion of every sale goes to help out a charity that helps out veterans and their families. So make sure you stock up, you protect your family, and at the same time, you get to bless veterans and their families. That is 4patriots.com, the number 4patriots.com. Okay, guys, I'm going to kind of skip the Jackson's 5 for today, although I am going to bring some headlines, some of today's headlines into the conversation as it relates to what R.C. Williams and I are talking about today. And what we are concerned about, what I'm concerned about is we know that the left are very good at never allowing a crisis go to waste. Even if the crisis is caused by incompetence, they will use that in order to advance their agenda to fundamentally transform the United States of America. Joe, I did a podcast yesterday. If you did not listen to that podcast, I don't often do this. Guys, I'm asking you to go back and listen to that podcast and to share that podcast. I don't think it's hyperbole when I say that Joe Biden is a dictator in the making. And I gave you plenty of examples. So I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just watching what's happening. I'm reading beyond the headlines. And I'm like, whoa, this cat is insane. This administration is insane. And they are going to destroy this country. Without any further ado, R.C. Williams, man, thank you for holding on. Guys, you guys don't know. Offline, we had a lot of problems coming up this morning. He's been so patient. R.C. Williams, Sherlock Exposes, Sherlock, S-H-E-R-L-O-C. So SherlockExposes.com. R.C. Williams, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show podcast.
Brother Carl, it's good to be on. We seem to keep meeting like this, but the good news, the good news is that we help to make sure a lot of people are awake and aware to what's going on. And by the way, you are not out of the realm of reality with the statement that Joe Biden is a dictator in progress, and it certainly feels a lot like the old Soviet Politburo. with a lot of what's happening right now.
All right. So, RC, there's no easy way to put this stuff, but first, let's do this. If you would, let's recap just quickly on the SVB collapse. So basically what we had is the Silicon Valley Bank in California, home to many tech investors, venture capitalists, startups, all this kind of stuff. 93%, RC, of the depositors at the Silicon Valley Bank had over $250,000 in the bank. So we're not talking about poor people. All right. We have the federal government, and this is what we're going to get into as far as digital, the fear of digital or threat of digital currency. We have the federal government that has bailed them out beyond the $250,000 FDIC insured monies, if you will. The reason why this collapse occurred is because you had incompetent, they're trying to blame capitalism. Folks, do not let these people blame capitalism for the breakdown of the SVB bank. It is a result of incompetence and wokeism, if anything, but it is not capitalism. So correct me if I'm wrong here, RC, because what we had were these tech investors, venture capitalists, tech startups. They all parked their money at this SVB bank. SVB invested in long-term bonds, 10-year, I believe it was 10-year treasuries. You had interest rates that hiked. We've all been paying attention to the news, RC.
Right.
Interest rates have been hiking as a result of Biden inflation and all of the money that has been, just plopped into the economy, if you will. And these people never bother to check their bank accounts. And you have the SVB executives that seemingly didn't know what the hell they were doing and never waged against inflation. So interest rates soar, the bond prices fall, and there's a run on the bank because people are freaking panicked that they're going to lose their money like crazy. SVB has to pay out. They cash in on the bonds, but they lost so much money on the bonds because the idiots weren't paying attention to the interest rates, I guess. So there's a run on the money, and the bank collapses, I think, within 48 hours, RC.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit, Carl, when this really fired up. So Peter Thiel, billionaire, Silicon Valley investor, early investor in PayPal and some others, went public and was telling his portfolio companies in his investment firm to pull their money out of Silicon Valley Bank. There was a problem. In essence, there was a contagion.
How long ago was that?
That started on Thursday, late Wednesday, early Thursday.
Wow.
He went public with the announcement. So here you have a contagion starting to spread. And by the way, Carl, we actually made the comment last night with Credit Suisse and the challenges they're having, and I'm going to come right back to Silicon Valley Bank, is that this is almost like The Walking Dead. If you're not a fan of the show, the whole story isn't about zombies. It's about what human beings will do to each other in difficult situations. But here's the deal.
Good point.
The virus in that TS19, everybody had it already. So it's like the banks are like The Walking Dead. They already have the virus. The contagion's already there. You can't stop it. It's just a matter of when it's going to start killing them off. So that said, Peter Thiel recognizes an issue. What you just described, Carl, was what he saw. And he saw bad enough fiscal mismanagement that he was telling the companies he had invested in to get their money out of Silicon Valley Bank. Then others said, well, wait a minute. Well, I'm going to tell my investment portfolio to get it out. So there's your first run on Silicon Valley Bank, right?
Okay.
By the time the normies, you and I, find out it's Friday, right, or late Thursday, early Friday, and all of a sudden, Silicon Valley Bank has been put into receivership. And the feds have taken it over because of fiscal mismanagement. They're basically upside down, right?
Let me clarify something. Receivership,
Sure.
Does that just mean that they're put in line to receive funds from the federal government? What exactly does that mean when you say receivership?
Yeah, so anytime that a business, and it's different for different business segments, but anytime a business is either bankrupt or insolvent, an organization, whether it's the feds or a court-appointed firm, will step in as a receiver to manage the process, right? Because there's still functions that have to happen. So this thing goes into receivership. So notice that these things generally happen on a Friday. This one was kind of weird timing, but they'll happen on a Friday because on the weekends, the banks are generally closed and they can try to figure things out. So on Friday, this bank goes into receivership. It's basically insolvent, for lack of a better term. Then the Fed say, okay, we've got roughly 48 hours or maybe 40 hours to get this figured out, because if we don't, and that bank opens Monday and we haven't fixed this, everything's going to collapse, right? So you have a worldwide systemic issue, not just a U.S. issue. So first, the Feds say, let's find a buyer. Well, nobody's interested. Then they say, let's put it up for auction. Nobody's interested. Now we get to late morning on Sunday. We're pretty much out of time here. And if I'm not mistaken, this past weekend, we lost an hour. So they had 1 hour less to figure it out. So here's what they came up with, Carl. And this gets into kind of the funny money, and people who people believe are really smart just generally have no clue whatsoever.
Right.
The Federal Reserve and the Treasury did what they do best. They just made it up. So here's what they said to you. Listen, we covered this breaking on Bloomberg Asia on Sunday night. It was a late night Sunday night trying to cover this information. But basically what the Fed said is that we're going to guarantee all deposits in Silicon Valley Bank, even above the $250,000 threshold for the FDIC, right? Here's what they did. They created the Bank Term Funding Program out of thin air. Now, you may say, well, how is the Fed and the Treasury able to do that? Well, they actually are. So the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the ESF, people can look this up, was created by the 1934 Gold Reserve Act. Now, you'll recall, if you're a historian, if not, I'll give you the short version. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt basically made it illegal for you to own gold in any form. And it was confiscated by the U.S. government. So here's a great hustle, right? Here's how your government treats you. They bought your gold for a nominal amount. Then the next day, they repriced gold and had a huge profit margin.
Of course.
Carl, this is no different than a street hustle, right? The government's been running like this forever, okay? So the Gold Reserve Act actually gave the Federal Reserve and the Treasury huge power to tap into this fund whenever they wanted. Here's what's going to freak everybody out. The way that fund has been traditionally used up until Sunday was to help countries whose economies were on the brink of collapse to stay stable.
Okay.
If it's being used for us now, what does that tell you about the state of banks, not just here, but all around the world? So there's your timeline. Literally, the government said, I can tell you the conversations without being in the room. They said, nobody wants to buy it. We can't auction it off. We're out of time. We've got to provide some type of promise or guarantee so that people don't run on every bank. Because once that happens, Carl, we know that the banks don't have the money. If you've never seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life, you should go watch it. And then The Simpsons did satire on it in an episode of The Simpsons back in the 90s, where basically the town runs on a bank and this bank owner has got to convince everybody. He's like, hey, your money's not here. I loaned it to Joe. I loaned it to Jane, right? That's what would have happened. So that's part one. Here's part two. And I know people who watch and listen to the show, Carl, have money in banks. And yes, your bank accounts have a guarantee or insurance from the FDIC up to a certain amount. But here's what you have to understand. The total amount of money that the FDIC had in tow was $125 billion. So in essence, if everybody ran on the banks right now, they would only be able to pay just over 1% of the total money on deposit. Okay?
Wow.
Here's what happened, Carl, and here's why they had to do this. They had to create this thing, right? We're going to do this bank term funding program. We're just going to pull it out of thin air and make it up. Because in one shot with Silicon Valley Bank, $21 billion needed to be guaranteed by the FDIC just to make the minimum insurance of $250,000 on all their deposits. So in essence, with one bank, you had roughly 25% of the FDIC total insurance pool wiped out.
Unfreaking believable. That is unfreaking believable. So only $125 billion on hand for the FDIC. You have approximately 20% of that or so wiped out with SVB alone. So God forbid there were a run on the banks across the country. Honestly, the little man would have the little men or us, average people, will get completely screwed because there's just not enough money there.
So it's the musical chairs, Carl, and there isn't a seat for you. And by you, I mean you, and every other normal person who works for a living or runs a business and tries to do the right thing. You know, we always joke when we do Rip from the Headlines every day, we have these snarky quotes that we use before we provide commentary, but it's really kind of true. It's like, hey, you're being screwed, but don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Move along. There is a dangerous precedent set with this, Carl. Number one, and it was on major media outlets last night, is that in essence, what the Biden administration did by allowing this to happen is they basically nationalized the banking system. And now what they're basically saying to you is that they're just going to guarantee everybody's deposits everywhere, no matter how much money they have in the bank, because it's the only way to make sure that there isn't a full-on economic collapse and a contagion that would take down the banking system all around the world.
RC, go ahead. No, finish your point, and then I want to go back. I want to go. Just don't forget this point. I want to go back to your mention of nationalizing the bank because I want you to expound on that.
Sure. So here's what's scary, Carl, and this is exactly what power brokers and big banks wanted to happen. People panic. And so they go to their local or regional bank or credit union. Right. They pull their money out and they put it in a big bank. And we'll come back to this a bit later.
Oh, my God. You're so freaking right.
Carl, and I'm saying this and it pains me, but I want people to understand. When you do that, you're literally walking into the kill box. So here's what happens. Your local or regional banks or credit unions are your backstop. That is the bulwark. That's the last stand for your economic freedom, right? Because you still have some level of control over the outcomes. You know these people, they can't go run and hide because they're in the community. That's really important, right? Yeah. But what happens now is that when those banks get run on, they fail. So now you're left with 5 or 6 banks that are too big to fail. Well, guess what happens? You get into the kill box, and now when they say to you, well, you know what? The banking system as it stands right now is so dangerous. We're just going to digitize everything for a safe and secure society, as Chancellor Palpatine from Star Wars would say, before the Galactic Empire took over the Republic. They now have you in a place where they can control you, and that's the first steps towards a central bank digital currency. Do not do it. Don't let them do this to you. And here's how we know how rapidly it's happening. On Monday and Tuesday, it was national news that the big banks were streamlining the process for people to open accounts and get their money into those banks as quickly as possible.
Right.
I mean, listen, don't.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? I'm in a local bank. I'm in a big bank too. I'll be honest, but I'm in a local bank. I'm going to be getting I'm going to be getting my money out of the big bank, but I'm in a local bank, actually a couple of local banks. So make sure you park your money there. I would say this, don't go nuts, but I do believe that any and everyone should always keep some cash on hand, whatever you can afford, just in case. You know, maybe it's $100, maybe it's a few $100s, maybe it's $1,000 or a couple $1,000s. Keep some cash on hand, just in case emergency. Do what you can afford. You don't go nuts. But like RC said, if you're not in a local bank or a credit union, get into one. Get into one. These big banks do not give a flip about you. I want to go back, and I want to go back to what RC said about nationalizing the banks. I mean, this is what's happening, and honestly, this is what's crazy, RC. And correct me if I'm wrong. In my mind, initially, I was thinking all intentionality, from the left, but the left just screws up, and then they're like, we screwed up. We may as well go forward with our agenda. I mean, they just never freaking stop. This is what drives me crazy about conservatives and Republicans. We play too nice with these people, and they're destroying the country. But going back to nationalizing the bank, essentially, like you said, we just watched them nationalize a bank, or if not the banks, based upon the fact that now anyone that's a depositor, if they have, a buttload of money or whatever, you know what, we'll be safe. Bank executives, the federal government will take care of us. So they've just hurt the situation rather than help the situation, because everyone knows they can be completely incompetent and get bailed out by the national system. And sadly, RC, I think a lot of common folks will be like, yeah, I want to make sure that my money is guaranteed. And so the federal government has you. And then the shift to digital currency, why don't we just make this safe for everybody? So none of this, will take care of it. You won't have to worry about your money being lost. Am I on the right path here, RC?
You are, Carl. So everything you said is absolutely correct. I'd like to just take a step back for a moment, then I'm going to step forward with your train of thought, because it's important for people to understand. So the people who are running Silicon Valley Bank and many of these banks, these people have no idea what they're doing. So, and I say that in the most caring way possible, because I know we're dealing with people's finances and they're very sensitive to that. But please understand, these people have no idea what they're doing. They're just guessing and making it up. And they're so greedy that they chase crazier and crazier investments to try to get a bigger return. You get your little smidgen, but they want the chunk. Yeah. So here's the challenge. If you look at the holders of Silicon Valley Bank debt, those who were invested in it, one of the largest shareholders in that bank was Vanguard. If you don't know this, Vanguard is really the largest controller and investor for 401ks, right? So you get put in this corner where these banks, and I'm going to get to the list of them and how much they have in derivatives, which I'll give a simple explanation for in a minute. But here's what you have. You have a scenario where if they didn't do what they did with Silicon Valley Bank, which I don't advocate, by the way. I'm not an advocator that the government should just step in and guarantee everything forever. I don't think that's the right answer. It's just bad economics, right? But here's the deal. If Silicon Valley Bank would have just completely imploded, what happens to the portfolio value of a Vanguard retirement fund? And, Carl, your parents, my parents, our aunts and uncles who are retired, and they're getting income from that. If you have a systemic collapse, then everybody who is retired or has some type of investment, they lose it all, right? And the reason this happened goes back to the top of our conversation. When you let the fox in the hen house, and you let these people who have no idea what they're doing or have as otherwise nefarious ideas of what they should do, when you let the patients run the asylum, this is where we end up. And the vigilance on this thing honestly comes from you and I, Carl. And by you and I mean the people who watch and listen to this. The average person, you're going to have to take a more active role in paying attention to who these people are, right? So now let's go back to what you were saying about getting people kind of in that kill box, right? Where the government says, hey, so this never happens again. We're going to cover everything. But the way to really fix this is to just have us handle it, right? That is step one into the central bank digital currency. We had this conversation with people yesterday. People say, well, look, digital dollar, right? And I say different. You're using a digital dollar today. Carl, we've had this conversation on the show in the past, but just a quick kind of synopsis. You use the digital dollar today. When you go and use your debit card or a credit card, that's basically what you're using. You still have a level of control and freedom over it for the most part, at least for the time being. Here's why the central bank digital currency hurts you. In essence, the government would become the bank. They would control your money in such a way that if they wanted you to spend it, they would incentivize you, quote unquote, by saying, we're going to charge you 10% every day you don't spend this money until you do or until it goes away. Or they could say, we don't want you spending money right now. So if you do, we're going to penalize you 10% every day that you do it until we tell you that it's okay for you to do it. And then we get into the scenario where it's like, boy, Carl sure tithes a lot to his church and they have conservative principles. So we're not going to let Carl do that anymore. We're not going to let RC do that anymore as a deacon if he wants to make a large contribution to his church. Nah, they believe in those American constitutional principles. We don't like that so much, so you can't spend your money there, right? There is your danger with the central bank digital currency. And Carl, so when you, and I'm going through because there's so many things that we want to cover, but what I want to talk to people about quickly is derivatives. And this isn't going to be a super economics conversation. What I want you guys to understand is that the current economic system runs on debt and interest, right? So people will loan you money, you pay it back with interest. That's how they make their money. When banks take in your money, they're not holding your money. They're lending it out, or they're making investments which seem to be more and more risky, which is why banks are insolvent, to get a return. And then if you want your money back, they'll get it to you whenever they can. Hey, screw you. You're just a depositor. Go away. Nobody likes you, right?
Right.
So here's the challenge, is that what these banks and investment groups do is they package up risky debt into big balls called derivatives, and then they go and make bigger bets on it, right? This is what caused the 2008 financial crisis. They took bad bets, pulled them together, sold them to somebody else, that they made even riskier bets. Here's the problem, Carl. When we took a look at where banks are at with their derivatives, I'm going to give you the top bank. JP Morgan has $55 trillion in derivatives exposure right now.
Whoa. Wow. Okay, that's wow. 55 trillion in just derivative exposure.
Yes. That's more than the national debt for the United States. We're at 31 trillion or so and growing, right? But think about that for a minute.
Right.
JP Morgan is all over everything. So is Wells Fargo. They're in that top 5 list. Okay. So is Credit Suisse, right? These guys are basically sitting, imagine them sitting in the seediest casino that you can think of, playing a card game, drinking a scotch, and gambling your money, where they're going to lose 7 to 8 out of 10 hands. Here's the bad part, Carl. I'm sorry, just one more. This is really important.
No, go ahead.
When they take this bad debt, so imagine they got really bad debt, then they lever it up 5 times. So if they're right, then they make 100% on their money. But if they're wrong, they lose it all. That's how they're gambling your assets right now. So now go back to why the government did what they did. They can't let a Silicon Valley bank fail because it's got too much in deposits and too many companies who are employing people in good paying jobs, right? So they can't let that happen. They're not going to let a big bank fail if they can at all avoid it before they can nationalize and centralize everything. Because think about what would happen if JP Morgan announced right now that they were insolvent. The entire world would implode and it would be Mad Max in like 5 seconds.
Wow. Okay. So, all right. So, and this is me just analyzing and being honest with myself. So my argument has been, or in part, or one of my arguments has been, Biden administration essentially bailed out his donors.
Yep.
But in a sense that's true, but there's a lot more to the story. And I want to be based upon what you're saying and based upon what I'm learning here. And I hope for those of you that are listening, make sure you subscribe to or check them out, SherlockExposes.com. They also have, or RC also has a weekly newsletter called wearethewatchmen.org, wearethewatchmen.org. Make sure you subscribe to that as well. But, I want to be, this is a hard pill to swallow, RC, because I'm largely a political guy. All right. So I bring the people on like you that have these niche talents and experts in this particular stuff to inform me as well. So, I just want to be honest with the audience. So it seems to me that my arguments, although right, are also lacking, to say the least. So this story, obviously, the federal government will seize the opportunity to create a central currency, but there are a lot more people or a lot more depositors at stake than just Biden's homies. This could have sent our financial system, our banking system, in complete and utter collapse, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, Carl. So not only could it, what we've said since this really started is that people don't quite appreciate just how close we are to a complete economic and banking system implosion. We're not clear of it yet. Think about what happened. Credit Suisse is a huge bank, which is another one, by the way, that earlier this year said they were going to pay all their executive bonuses up front. Okay. Credit Suisse has a history of issues with malfeasance and everything, but they're still a huge bank and they're into everything. They were on the brink of insolvency. Swiss National Bank had to come in and guarantee a loan of $50 billion to try and restore some level of stability in Credit Suisse so that we didn't have the contagion continue to spread. So they basically took the Walking Dead virus and in essence what they did is they had it on a table and they put a glass over it. Notice that it's not dead. They just have it covered.
Right.
This is we're nowhere near being out of the woods on this thing, Carl. And like I said,
what? Wow.
Everybody's got it. So here's the problem. We did this back in December. We did a special report from Atlanta. We were in Atlanta for the runoff elections, and we broke news that the Bank for International Settlements, that is the central bank of central banks, put out a report that $80 trillion was missing on balance sheets all over the world, and they had no idea where it was.
Oh my God, man.
So
my God.
The people who are supposed to know, but who are also working to usher in a central bank digital currency, put out a report that says we don't know where the money is, and this is the exact reason why we need a central bank digital currency, and which, by the way, and this actually plays into what's happening right now, that cryptocurrency is bad. So, Carl, look what happened. We actually had 3 banks at a minimum. There's still some that are on the brink that they haven't officially said are done yet. We had 3 banks fail. Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate, and Signature Bank. Silvergate and Signature were more into crypto. Notice that they didn't get saved. Okay? So here's why. The government hates competition. Cryptocurrency, in its purest form, is an economic backstop for you. Not only are you free from the system, Uncle Sugar doesn't get his cut. If Carl and I are doing a transaction in Bitcoin or whatever, he doesn't get his cut of the action. Right? We've completely cut him out. That's why it's decentralized. So the government hates competition because they want that same technology to be centralized so they can control you. So what do they let happen? They let banks who are into that thing go down the tubes, and then they say, look how bad cryptocurrency is. You shouldn't be in it. It's bad for you. Let us help you.
And the answer would have been, correct me if I'm wrong here, RC, if Signature Bank fails as a result of decisions they made, then what's fair is fair.
Correct.
SVB should have failed too. Correct. But instead, that's not happening. And unfortunately, that's the way that it's probably always going to happen with the federal government. They're always going to do what's in their best interest and not what's in our best interest. Hence, Gavin Newsom coming out and praising the SVB bailout. not sharing with people that he's got the money with 3 of his wineries tied up into SVB as they get the bailout, and he's working from a blind trust. Yeah, right. Anyway, absolutely amazing. Okay, this is very informative, RC, very scary. Let me do this. Let me take a quick break. I want to make sure that we talk about our sponsor, MyPillow, and we're coming right back to RC. I just want to touch on a couple of headlines and get RC's opinion on it. Again, you can check out his website, SherlockExposes.com, SHERLOC, exposes.com. Also, you can subscribe to his newsletter, wearethewatchmen.org, wearethewatchmen.org. But don't forget to subscribe to our podcast as well, all right? So you can find us wherever you go to get your podcast on The Carl Jackson Show. The Carl Jackson Show. You can find us online, social media, The Carl Jackson Show. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Getter. We're on True Social. Anywhere that we are, it is The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find us. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Some of you that don't like YouTube, we're on Rumble as well. But you can find us on YouTube, The Carl Jackson Show. We have the same URL at Rumble if you prefer Rumble. But let me talk to you about My Pillow. My Pillow 2.0. Mike Lindell and his fabulous company are out with a new pillow. And it is fabulous. RC, I got to tell you, if you don't have one, I don't know why you haven't used my promo code yet to get one. But mypillow.com, use the promo code Carl. All right, CARL. Just go at the top of the page or go to the top of the page. Click on the radio listener square. Enter my name. Right now, there is a buy one, get one free deal for My Pillow. Listen, this is a company that is providing American jobs, American-made products, and this is a good product. Guys, I've already told you the story. It took a long time. All right, I know I lost some cool points on this. All right, so I lost a pillow that I had ever since I was a teenager. And then it took me years to find a pillow that I liked. That was My Pillow. So then Mike Lindell changes up the game again. He comes out with My Pillow 2.0, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to have to promote this thing, and I've already fell in love with My Pillow. I hope Mike doesn't destroy me. Well, he didn't. I love the new My Pillow 2.0. It has the same inner feel as the original, but it has this outer layer that dissipates heat. It's made with a special fabric. It's softer. It's smoother. It's cooler. It feels amazing. The My Pillow 2.0, all you have to do is go to mypillow.com. Again, click on the radio listener square at the top of the page. Enter my name, Carl, CARL, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. That is 800-858-0263. mypillow.com. Okay, so now let's go back to RC here. We are in danger not only of our economy collapsing, but if the economy collapses, if our banking system collapses, who's going to save the day? Obviously, the federal government, Joe Biden. Just think of Joe Biden handling your money, all right? Good God almighty. Good God almighty. This is so freaking scary. All right, we are in scary territory. RC, before we came online, there was I'm a little upset that I don't hear more conservatives. I mean, there should be a press conference on this stuff. The only presidential candidate that I hear talking about this stuff with any regularity, RC, is Vivek Ramaswamy. And I love Vivek Ramaswamy, but at least for right now, he doesn't have large enough name exposure. So I feel like Trump and DeSantis needs to be out there. Thank God. I'm looking at this headline from Daily Wire, RC, and it says, Ted Cruz hammers Biden for bailing out corrupt Silicon Valley Bank. He says this is like Bonnie and Clyde. And again, that is just the headline without going into the article itself. But what's your take? Do we need more people speaking out and speaking up about this stuff on the Republican side? Are they doing enough?
So we certainly do, Carl. The thing about Ted Cruz being a constitutional lawyer, Ted has a great knack for really summing up the issue. He is so right about Bonnie and Clyde. You basically got a crew, right, that is just going around and basically implementing their will, kind of doing whatever they want, creating the problem and the solution, so they're getting paid both ways.
So true.
Yeah, he's spot on there. And conservatives and Republicans that are in Congress need to speak out. And one of the things that they need to take the time to do is really help people understand what's at stake here. So Ted Cruz has really kind of teed it up, is that if you're going to let these people rob you blind, they will take everything you have. You said it earlier. Liberals don't stop, right? They're going to get everything that they can, and they don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your constitutional rights. These people don't care. They're out for everything because they have a plan, which, by the way, they're rapidly implementing. Agenda 2030 is a real thing, in case you think that that's just some crazy talk that we talk about. You have to step up and say, okay, we're not going to let this go until you explain to people in a way that they can understand why you just helped your friends. Basically, that's it. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, and honestly, making that argument could kind of is as weird as this sounds, can kind of save the day, because we need people's eyes on this. We need people to be talking about this. We need these federal regulators to have some accountability. There's absolutely none. It's just really scary. I'm trying to find what either you sent me earlier this week, RC, or if I got it in my inbox. This is from your Substack. And I just want to go over a couple of points. This is from Watchmen on the Wall. WatchmenOnTheWall.org. Sorry here, guys. Let me. Okay. It talks about what I love about this is you give us some of the things to think about. So again, you say, well, you know what you said, but here it is. This is an attempt by the government to avoid bank runs throughout the United States and a potential economic collapse. And we're talking about the bank term funding program that was just made up out of the sky that RC talked about earlier in the podcast. So we've touched on that. You also say federal regulators closed Signature Bank. That was then today, citing systemic risk. And that was a bank that dealt heavily in cryptocurrency. So the government gets rid of its competition. And listen, if you make bad decisions and you fail, that's America. That is capitalism. Yep. That's the good and bad of capitalism. The problem is the federal government. There's no accountability with the federal government. They can hire people based upon wokeism that are completely incompetent. And then they, even when they fail, they manage to win because they're like, screw it. We're just going to go this way using your taxpayer money. And if you want to stop on any one of these things and expound, please do, RC. The number 3 thing you said to ponder, there may already be a contagion in the banking system that is unknown. You talked about that. We urge readers to watch their accounts and keep up with breaking news. And also, please, if you're not in a local credit union, a small bank, get into one. Please get into one. Remain alert to any moves towards a government-supported digital currency. Guys, there may be some people, you know what, let's stop here for a sec, RC, because there may be some people that think moving to a digital currency, to a centralized digital currency where the federal government controls what you buy and all this kind of stuff, they may think it's a good thing because they may think, hey, my money will always be safe. My money will always be okay. This SVB collapse should show you that that isn't true. But for people that might think that, RC, what would you say to them?
If you honestly believe that the government is capable of taking care of you in any meaningful way, I'll ask you to do a couple of things. One, hop in your car or on a plane and take a trip to East Palestine, Ohio, and tell me how well that's going. The other one is try to get on a plane today and have to pray that either A, you don't run into someone on the tarmac, or B, which happened last week, a plane was about to land and then all of a sudden had to pull up so it didn't collide with another plane just as it was getting ready to land. If you really believe that if the government can't handle the most basic of things, that they are capable of running a banking system and making sure that your money is safe and secure, you're crazy. But here's why. Here's why. It's not what you think, right? Because it's like the government knows exactly what they're doing.
Yep.
That's the scary precision, right? They want you in a place, Carl, where they can say, because we know they have no idea what they're doing in the traditional sense. When it comes to helping people or saving people, ask the people in East Palestine or who have gone through something on an airplane recently, how well that goes, right? But the government wants to get you into this funnel, and here you say, oh, the digital currency is going to be safe and great. Yes, until, right? Because these are people who are people, and if they can get a consensus that, you know what, it's like what the ATF is doing, Carl, tracking poor people who are buying firearms. Oh, you know, those poor people, if they get riled up because they believe their freedoms are being infringed on, we need to know where they are and what they've bought so that we know what we're dealing with. Imagine a world where the government controls your bank account and they decide that people need to spend to stimulate the economy. Yeah, well, you say, look, I'm a saver, right? I'm going to be smart. If I get extra money, I'm going to sock it away for a rainy day. And they say, well, look, in this world, you don't get to do that anymore. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to charge you 5% a day as a tax
Right.
For every day you don't do what we tell you until we tell you different. And then imagine that there's no other way for you to do anything else. So people have said to Juliana and I, Juliana's my business partner, we co-publish, we do all this stuff together. People have said to us that you guys are crazy. There is no way that the government would ever do anything like that. And we have a simple response, Carl. Let's go back to what we said earlier in this podcast. In 1933, the president of the United States convinced Congress to make owning gold illegal. They confiscated it. Not only did they confiscate your gold, the next day they reset the price so the government had a slush fund.
Yeah, this is guys, we are living in scary times, and it isn't my goal to freak you out. But I know that RC could explain this stuff far better than I could. I mean, I know that I'm a genius, and so you guys, I get all that. But sometimes even I have to be humble, RC. And when people have more information, I have to bring them on. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. But I don't want you guys to panic. I want you to fight. I want you to call your congressmen. I want you to call your senators. I want you to tell them you guys need to be speaking up against this. If it's okay to close down Signature Bank, and I know Barney Frank is there and on the board and all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of dirt is happening there, no doubt about it. But ultimately, they were willing to let that crumble because it's competition for the government. The government does not have the authority to do that. I can't stand when I hear the president or federal regulators talking about, it's a competition is good for the market. When they're talking about the federal government, they're using our money to create competition against us, and they're banking on you being dumb enough to not realize that they're using your money to create competition against you. It's totally insane. And I mean, if I could use these as ancillary points, this is why they bring up the LGBTQ stuff. Basically the trans stuff. All of this is a transaction. Or is a distraction, because they want to get you, people on the left particularly, they want to get you so hyped up and mad emotionally on these issues that they become a champion for these particular issues. So then you think, okay, well, they're championing me on me being a guy wanting to get my penis cut off, or a woman wanting to get a mastectomy and pretend like I'm a dude. So if they're championing me here, then they're surely not going to take advantage of me when it comes to my money. Am I wrong, RC?
You're absolutely right. So they get people into these kill boxes, Carl, right? We wrote about this with Watchmen on the Wall this past weekend because we tie scripture into the news of the day. We talked about the Biden White House giving a Woman in Courage Award to a man. And we said, what you really have here is the erasure. They're trying to erase women, biological women, from the equation. So let's think about why. Women are protectors and structure of the home foundationally, right? They raise children, and they're really kind of the barometer, right? And they also are a really important part of the reproduction process. So what they've done is they said, well, if you feel like a woman, you're a woman. That's enough for us. But then they took it a step further. Now they've created, and we shared this story, the artificial wombs. So now, hey, look, you don't even need a woman to have a baby. Just do an artificial womb, and you're good.
Moly.
This is what they do, Carl. So they get one side against another, and then you have people you have men who are women, who think they are women and believe they are women, talking about women's rights and saying anybody that disagrees with us is evil, including women. We're the feminists, right? But that's another for another time. This is how they systemically destroy it. And then you've got these people, like you said, on that side where they're like, the government loves me. They would never do anything to hurt me with my money. Meanwhile, think about the logic. Anytime that a dictatorship takes over, the Quislings, the ones who turned on their fellow man, are the ones that they kill first. Just keep that in mind. If you're watching this and you're on one side of the equation that isn't the right one, it's true. If you don't, they've already got you. If you're a woman who is having surgery to try to reassign their gender, which is impossible, or whatever, they've already got you. They've already taken from you what God has given you. So they've already eliminated you from the equation, and then they'll figure out some other way to just kill you off when the time is right, when you're no longer useful. Carl, this is why I know that you do what you do, and we do what we do because this is the hard truth that people need to hear. And just if I can take a moment, what you said a minute ago about reaching out to your congressional representatives and even your state and local representatives, I can tell you this from experience. If just one of you picks up and calls, maybe not so much. But if 1,000 of you flood the phone lines, they're going to pay attention.
Good point.
You're going to see something happen. We see this happen locally, politically, when we make moves. We're part of an organization that does that type of thing. Anytime that we call, we're in Florida, anytime that we hit the governor's office and there's 1,000, 5,000 of us all doing it, they're like, what do you guys want? What can we fix?
It's such a good point because a lot of people, RC, get discouraged and, oh man, my congressman or what have you don't do anything. They don't hear us. They don't listen to us. And I've heard plenty of them interviewed where they said, well, if people call, if people call, then we know what they want. If they don't call, we don't. So they really do pay attention to emails. They pay attention to calls. The truth of the matter is there's typically just not enough of us doing that. And that includes me. I'm inconsistent with that. So I've got to get better, and I will get better with that. And I am going to be calling my congressman, which is Corey Mills, now here in District 7 right here in Florida, and tell him I want to hear. I understand he's on a different committee. I don't care. I want to hear him talking about this stuff because, people need to understand what's happening with this banking system and what the federal government is trying to do. These people go to Washington, D.C., or they go to the state capitol. They're supposed to be there to protect our interests. And if they don't know what's going on, or if you're not speaking out and telling them to speak for you, then we're the ones that are going to get screwed. It's simple as that. And we are dealing with, in my opinion, a dictator in the making in the White House. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I really do implore you to go back and listen to my podcast yesterday because I laid out several stories, one that I'm going to get to later. RC mentioned, I think we mentioned it offline, but I will either today or later today or tomorrow, I'll record a podcast. The ATF is gaining financial information on potential gun buyers for warrantless tracking. Documents are showing, thanks to the Gun Owners of America requesting a FOIA request from the ATF. The ATF is literally tracking poor people who buy guns. Why? We'll get into that. That's a podcast for tomorrow or for later. But this is insane. RC, listen, before we close out, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience? Again, go to SherlockExposes.com, SherlockExposes.com, Sherlock without the K. So just SHERLOC, exposes.com. We are the watchmen.org to receive the weekly newsletter. But just closing out here, RC, anything else that the listeners should know, should be aware of, specifically when it comes to the issue of digital currency, maybe cryptocurrency, or just what we've talked about today?
Sure, Carl, and thank you for having me on. When we go to press today with Rip from the Headlines, our top story is going to be around the Federal Reserve's FedNow service. So in essence, what this is, it's to facilitate instant payment services by financial institution, regardless of where they're at, around the clock, every day of the year. What people need to understand is the FedNow program is set to roll out starting in July. This is the precursor, the road being laid for the central bank digital currency. What the government is basically telling you is that banks do a really bad job of getting you your money. And so with the FedNow program, everything will just happen instantly. So you no longer have to wait. That's going to feel really good for a lot of people. And it's going to give them the justification to take the next steps for a full-blown central bank digital currency. Here's what Julian and I recommend.
Scary.
Yeah, it is scary. Stay vigilant and pay attention. If you are listening or watching Carl's show, you need to not only do that, but you need to tell 10 of your friends. If you read or watch what Julian and I do with Rip from the Headlines or with Watchmen on the Wall, take it and tell 10 friends. Support us however you can. Support Carl's sponsors, because the more fuel that we have in the engine, the more often we can have these conversations. But it really comes down to you. Nobody's going to come to save you. It's you, okay? And knowledge is power. If you know what they're trying to do, you can continue to call them out. And you can empower someone like a Ted Cruz to do your bidding. Why do I say that? Because that's his entire job, is to do your bidding.
Yep. Yep. It's so important. Such an important point. And RC, I can't believe that I totally forgot about the Fed Now issue. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Very, very important. Anyway, I'll be filling in for Officer Tatum next week. We'll get RC on and we'll talk about some of this stuff a little more, hopefully get a little more exposure on this topic. Because it needs to be heard, and we need, honestly, we're all in this together, guys. I've told you time and again that my goal here on the Carl Jackson Show podcast is to restore Judeo-Christian values. I don't want you to be ashamed of Judeo-Christian values in America. They are the underpinning of this country. Without them, this country is worthless. And also to restore the middle class. This a run on the banks, obviously, all over the place, would crush the middle class. But the people like Gavin Newsom would totally be fine because his homie in the White House, who he wants to undermine and take his position, by the way, but his homie in the White House will take care of him. They will take care of their big tech buddies because they're donors. I mean, this is a government that's of, for, and by the bureaucrats and by their homies. That's it. You get cut out. They will totally destroy the middle class. Look at what Gavin Newsom did to the people in California. He totally locked the state down. I mean, by authoritarian dictate, destroyed all types of small businesses, while people that had money were allowed to. I remember watching a story that was, I believe it was outlined on Fox News, where literally there were two businesses side by side in Los Angeles. One lady had a restaurant. Another person had a restaurant. I believe it was the LA County mayor or something would do, or the Democrat Party would do festivities at one restaurant or something like that. So it was allowed to stay open, but the one right next door was not. And it's insane. This stuff never makes sense. And the homies of the left are the ones that always benefit. You will get crushed. The average man, the average woman, the person that's trying to make it out of the hood, into the middle class, out of the middle class, into the wealthy class, you are the ones that will get trampled upon. That's the way it works. That's the way they're fixing the system. Do not let them do it. You have a voice. You have representatives in your state capital and in the capital of the United States of America. Make sure you use your voice. We cannot be silent. I can't say that enough. We cannot be silent. Just as the banking system is on the verge, this country is on the verge. There is nowhere else to go, guys. I know I say that a lot. There's nowhere else to go, except if you die, you go to heaven. That's a good thing. But beyond that, there's nowhere else to go on this planet. All right. Anyway, crazy times, RC. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having us on, Carl.
Absolutely. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, please follow us wherever you go to get your podcasts. We are there, Apple, Google, Spotify. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube. We're also on Rumble. Follow us on social media, The Carl Jackson Show, wherever we are on social media. I think Twitter, it's at Carl Jackson Show. But even if you search The Carl Jackson Show, I will pop up. All right. So wherever I am, The Carl Jackson Show. We appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Don't forget our sponsors, MyPillow.com. Use my name. The number 4Patriots.com. Use my name. Make sure you get survival food for your family. Make sure you get a good night's rest on me, MyPillow.com, with the new MyPillow 2.0. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.